Hi, and thank you for joining me today. I'm Will Brennan, natural lifestyle expert and founder of Desert Mountain Apothecary. Today, I'm discussing what a lot of us are going through, especially on the West Coast, which is self-care during an ongoing crisis. I'm presenting now some footage that was taken the weekend before last in Los Angeles, and that was October 26th, Saturday, October 26th. This year's wildfire season in California has been destructive and dangerous beyond compare, and every year it seems to get worse. A recent trip to Los Angeles really brought this to the forefront of my mind because as I went around with my camera and I was so excited to get some different panoramic scenes on film, it was apparent just how bad the wildfires already were. And then shortly after we left, just a few hours later actually, the Getty fire right in the middle of town in Bel Air and Brentwood sparked, and that just kicked off a whole new level of smoke in town, and one by one many new fires over the last week started and are still burning, and it's actually nothing compared to the fires north of San Francisco. Those ones are just apocalyptic beyond measure. When I took this video of kind of familiar sights in Los Angeles, you know, Santa Monica Bay, the mountains of Malibu, the downtown skyline, the smoke was so prevalent and even more prevalent in the camera than the naked eye. And I really struggled to find some commentary, some meaningful commentary for this video, which was actually really interesting and I thought worth watching. And as every day went on, the fires got worse and worse and worse, and the air quality got worse and worse and worse for us. And it just truly, the fires are so apocalyptic. Of all the things that we deal with out here in California, the fires, I think, put the biggest damper on our lives and just truly even changed the nature of our days and the world around us. As the fires went on, I really brought this existential question to the forefront of my mind, and that question was, are we going to pay some horrible price for all of our years of good weather, good living, happy upbeat culture and palm trees? And we all thought probably that an earthquake would be our big leveling comeuppance to the good life here, but maybe it's the fires. Maybe, you know, just the very way we're living, maybe one day the way we live won't even be an option. And that question, I think, comes to mind whenever the fires are going and then goes away when it's off. But now we're getting to the point that the fire, there's something burning almost all the time in our state. So it's a question that's now on our mind all the time. As the week went on and the fires got worse and smoke filled our valley here in the desert, I was, you know, kind of taken off course a little bit, taken off my productive and upbeat, you know, mindset that I try to live in. I was really fixated on the fact that I couldn't go for a walk. So I like to take a walk every morning when I wake up, and also I couldn't take a hot tub, go to the whirlpool bath in the evening because it's outside. And I was so fixated on those two things, and I really thought, wow, my major life advice is to go take a walk every day, and I try to do that. And that advice is meaningless when you can't go outside, and most people don't have a treadmill at home, and their home is not large enough to have any sort of meaningful walk inside of it. And I was struggling to keep up with what needed to be done, and I was struggling to stay in a good mental space, and I had completely trashed my house after traveling and going to the beach. So the house was just completely filled with sand and just the detritus of coming in and out. So I was really at a loss for what to do, because in a way that morning walk, looking at the mountains, looking at the palm trees, kind of kicks off my day, kicks off my circadian rhythm, and I feel very energetic when I do it during the day, and I feel very centered by the time I walk back in the door. But there's so many other things you can do to also make yourself feel better. So if I had, for example, 10 things that I did to make myself feel better, just because I couldn't do number 1 doesn't mean I can't start at number 2 and work my way down. Something that one of the cornerstones of my advice is to have healthy routines and habits that put your good health on autopilot, put your good mood, that build a good day on autopilot. And if you can't do one, you just have to move down the list and do the rest of those things. Like a lot of people in California or anywhere in the world experiencing these kinds of wildfires, it's an ongoing day-to-day crisis. And especially when it comes to the Santa Ana winds, the fires may not get better for days and days and days on end. There may be no containment for days and days and days on end, simply because the weather doesn't permit it. I noticed myself getting very anxious and depressed, getting very unfocused, and having my mood decline. And I knew I wasn't the only one. I knew everyone else was feeling like this on some level. Much less, what about all the people that actually had to evacuate? And even more to the point, what about the countless people that lost their homes, pets, their family members, their loved ones are the first responders? And it just brought back to the forefront of my mind once again that when we're feeling so out of control, when the world at large is at chaos, one of the very best things we can do is do those habits and routines that we have built for ourselves to pull ourselves back up from a depressed, anxious, unfocused place and back into a place where we can react, where we can be calm, where we can reserve our energy for when we really might need it. And a lot of crises, in sort of our American paradigm, there's really nothing we can do for most of us if we're not actually evacuating, if we're not helping the first responders. If none of those things apply to us, we're really just stuck inside in the smoky air with all the doors and windows closed. So we have to find a viable way to still make a good day out of that situation and keep things going. One of the worst things about getting depressed, anxious, getting into a maladaptive mental state is that all of those recurring tasks of the day, a lot of them get delayed because we're so unfocused, we feel so out of control and scattered. And then it builds up and it builds up and it builds up and it builds up, and so eventually you're facing this basic cliff face. You're facing a cliff face that you need to climb up just to make up all the things you didn't do. Whereas if you can just keep going on those things, if you can just keep going on those good habits, you will be in such a better place when the crisis dies down. Now, something really interesting to me is that just this last weekend, so many people that I interacted with described, after even just broaching the subject of wellness and self-care and asking how they felt, they told me, different people told me in different ways, that they felt trapped in this elevated stress level, that their central nervous system was in such an elevated fight or flight response state that they could never go down, and they hadn't had quality sleep in years, and it was just ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. And I told them that they were doing the worst thing to themselves, and that they had to basically do anything they possibly could to bring that central nervous system as a whole down into a less overstimulated, overstressed state. And I refer them to my YouTube channel because I do have answers for how to do that. It's unfamiliar to the average American now, but it's not that hard, and everything you need is available to you. You already have everything you need to do it. When you're in an ongoing crisis that keeps you trapped in the house, whatever that is, that could be literally anything. An act of self-care, a very important act of self-care, is cleaning and keeping the house tidy and keeping the house really nice to be in, because let me tell you, the only thing worse than being trapped in the house and you don't want to be there is being trapped in the house and having it be filthy. For example, if you did have to evacuate, it would be so worth it to spend that extra 10 minutes while you're getting ready emptying the fridge and freezer and garbage. So in 10 days, 4 days, however many days when you come home, if you're lucky enough to have a house that's still standing, you won't have a bunch of maggots and flies and rotting food in your garbage cans and refrigerator. Another big factor of these fires is that the power companies are now turning the power off. So people are being inconvenienced in multiple ways. I mean, we are not equipped, the average American, in terms of skills or setup to exist without power. That's a huge stress on a household for people with medical problems. You have babies in the house, you're trying to keep milk cold. That is a big problem to overcome. So it might actually seem selfish to you to be doing self-care activities or doing anything to nurture yourself or try to sustain yourself when you're going through this ongoing crisis. But it's actually the opposite. It goes back to that age-old metaphor for being on a plane and being given the instructions to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on your child or other dependent. So with self-care in a crisis, that might seem ridiculous to you, and that's because the way self-care has been co-opted and commercialized. So when you hear self-care in a crisis, an image that might come to mind is someone who goes and gets their nails done while their house is burning down, and they have top of the line insurance, whatever, they'll rebuild. That's ridiculous, and that's not what I'm saying at all. Really what I'm making the case for is that taking care of yourself and lowering your stress levels, raising your energy levels, keeping yourself moving and fit and focused, that is only going to enable you to do what needs to be done in that situation. Whether it's evacuate, whether it's just keep body and soul together. Also just keeping the morale going in your family, keeping everyone, it's easier for everyone not to go down in the bad place when the head of the household or the person who's running everything is not going down to the bad place. So some strategies for dealing with this are exercise, stretching, and meditation. If you can do all three, you're going to feel so much better. There are things that you can do to exercise at home, but when I was pining away for a walk when it was all smoky, there was actually not a single thing stopping me from getting in the car and going to the gym right nearby in the climate-controlled, air-purified gym and doing that same walk. So if you are stuck in the house but you can still get in the car and go to the gym and exhaust yourself. You're going to feel so much better when you go back home. You're going to feel so much calmer, and that is the number one thing to get rid of cabin fever. So I'm definitely telling everyone out there who's going into winter, keep moving this winter. You will not feel like you're trying to crawl the walls during those dark, long winter nights. And one thing that's very, very hard not to do in an ongoing crisis is to put on the cable news or the local news or social media feeds and just watch video and look at images of the crisis all the time. Our brains, our subconscious, find it almost impossible to distinguish between those images happening to others and if it's really happening to us. Now, our logical, conscious mind, of course, can make those distinctions, but what happens is our subconscious mind can't. So we're putting all of that in there, it's going to come back into the surface, either through stress, through insomnia. Sometimes you will have to monitor the news for a moment's notice for evacuation warnings or news like that, but if it's not necessary, give yourself about 10 minutes to apprise yourself of the situation and then put it away and move on to something in your own world, or meditate, or something that is not stimulating your stress response, particularly with the fires. They're so apocalyptic. The images and the videos, you can't help but imagine yourself being there, and just I mean, I watched a video from the Malibu fire of a woman escaping from the flames through a canyon, and it was as if it had happened to me, because it was so scary and it was so real. And the woman, was just repeating over and over and over and over, how can this be happening? Oh my God, how can this be happening? And how am I ever going to get out of this? And she miraculously survived, but plenty of people didn't survive in the same exact scenario. And what I'm trying to explain to you is that I can feel the fight or flight response in my body right now. I'm fighting back tears because I'm imagining myself going through this. It didn't happen to me. I was in Indian Wells that day, but the subconscious mind, it's so real. So we have to be guardians of our subconscious, guardians of knowing what we put in is eventually going to come out in some form or fashion. And so especially guard your children. They're already going to be in a stressed out enough situation, and they see you upset, they see you glued to the news. That's the model for them, and they are going to feel the exact same way, and it's just going to compound within the family. So really keep the video in particular to a minimum of the crisis. Speaking of going into winter, I cannot be the only one whose waistline measurement is going up as the temperature goes down. And plus you have the fires and the ongoing different crises. I have been packing it on. I've gained 7 pounds in the last couple weeks. And between the cold nights, we had a cold snap here on top of it, freeze warnings and everything. So to me, that just kicks my body into gear of wanting to eat rich, savory foods, and lots of them, and just put on as much weight as possible for the winter to hibernate. Now, that is not my plan. That is not what my conscious mind wants to do and is going to do. So I've got to fight that tooth and nail. And we got to realize a lot of us are suffering from some form of food addiction. There are people that are suffering from food addiction that aren't fat, either because they have really fast metabolisms, they have really, really physically demanding jobs, or they're on medications for maybe a different illness that cause them to have rapid weight loss, and so they never have any physical symptoms of food addiction. But food addiction is so prevalent and insidious because there is a societal bias towards obesity, but not really towards overeating. We just kind of laugh it off as, binge this, binge that, whatever. But when you are trying to eat your feelings or alleviate stress through eating, it's really no different to the chemistry of your brain than doing street drugs, because you're taking something external to try to create a dopamine and serotonin rush, like a pleasurable euphoric rush or a comforting rush, but you're having this huge cost to your overall health, a cost to the point that very well may kill you just as much as street drugs will. So we really, really have to focus on having some ways readily available to deal with our stress that aren't having these negative ways. Because let's face it, the most typical ways of dealing with our stress in our country are eating, drinking, distraction, social media, and being obsessed with other people's opinions, also social media. I think those are the 4 main drugs of choice for the average person. Maybe video games. So maybe 5. I'd say those are 5 broad ways that we deal with our stress, all with extremely negative repercussions. So we may get that little bit of escape from our stress initially, but we're gonna have this huge negative externality. So if you can be mindful enough to have that sensation of hunger, but realize that your stomach is full, you don't need to eat, and then say, okay, it's okay that I'm feeling stressed out right now. I don't need to then stuff my face. I can meditate, I can clean, I can stretch, or I can just sit and be stressed out and accept the fact that that is what it's like to be stressed out. And there's probably a good reason for it. All of these thoughts have been ruminating in my mind for the last week or so, but something about this last weekend where two different groups of people came to me in extreme distress in just average social situations. And it reminded me that self-care as a concept is so much less effective because of the way it's been commercialized and co-opted into basically a parody of what this powerful concept really can do. And so it really, in my mind, is misnamed and should be called self-preservation. Wouldn't you take that more seriously if you thought, I'm going to take 10 minutes or 20 minutes for self-preservation? Because that's really, really what it is, because life is a marathon, not a sprint. So if you are going to run the marathon of life and get whatever it is goal you want at the end, contentment, satisfaction, love, a clean home, anything, a healthy body, you're going to need to nurture yourself and keep yourself able to continue that marathon. And you're going to need to find ways that bless you and make you more healthy and more strong, rather than have this horrible cost to pay later. When the going gets tough, most people's instinct is going to be, oh, well, I can't do anything for myself because whatever's going on is so pressing and so important that I couldn't possibly do anything for myself. But it's actually the opposite. We really need to up the self-care when the going gets tough. That's when we need it more than ever. That's when it's really going to shine. Self-care is going to help you on a good day, but it's going to transform your bad day. It's going to be a lifesaver. And some days when you feel like you're just falling down and you have nothing to grab onto, that's the tangible ladder to hold onto and climb back up and pull yourself back up. When I talk about habits and routines, what I'm doing is basically writing out instructions from a good day. On a good day, you're calm, things come to you, there's a flow to the day, and you pretty much know what needs to be done, you know what to do. But on a bad day, when the stress ramps up, we actually lose a lot of our cognitive abilities when we get into fight or flight mode. And when we stay in an elevated, sustained stress level, we can lose the ability to use all of our mental faculties and really have analytical thinking. So when you have a list ready to go of all the things that you should do in a day to make you healthiest and happiest, it's like taking that good day and giving yourself a reminder on the bad day. It's like a gift from you to the future you. Because when you have that written out, you don't have to think about it and you can just do it. And that just makes it more automatic, more beneficial, more integrated in your life. Over time, it's not a routine, it's not something you do, it's truly who you are, and it's not something you have to do or you want to do, it's something you get to do. Thank you so much for joining me today. When things get tough, up the self-care. Self-care should really be called self-preservation, and you're not selfish for taking good care of yourself and nurturing yourself. You're only going to be able to serve and love those around you better than ever. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. My name is Will Brennan. I'm a natural lifestyle expert and the founder of Desert Mountain Apothecary.